It started with silence. No sirens, no breaking news, just a strange calm, like standing in a room where something should be humming but isn't. At first, it felt like a fluke, a few policy changes, a small rate hike, but the market didn't flinch. Stocks rose when they should have stumbled. Currencies stayed still in the middle of chaos. Traders watched, economists guessed. But behind the closed doors, in the rooms where real power whispers, one quiet phrase kept surfacing. The model says it's fine. But whose model? It doesn't live in your app. You won't see it on Bloomberg. It's buried deep inside central banks, research departments, global institutions. An algorithm so embedded in the system, even presidents take its word as gospel. It calculates inflation, predicts your job prospects, tells governments how much money to print. But here's what no one tells you. The model is beautiful, mathematically elegant, and dangerously wrong. It missed 2008. It ignored warning signs that were in plain sight, and right now, it's still guiding decisions that shape your daily life with stunning confidence and zero accountability. This isn't a glitch, it's the foundation, a machine built on theories, not reality. To see it clearly, we need to go back to where it all began, to a time when a few economists thought they could simulate the world and almost no one questioned them. Let me show you what they built. It started in the ivory towers, far from the trading floors, far from the chaos of real markets. In quiet offices filled with chalkboards, equations, and confidence. Economists believed they could map the entire economy, like you'd map a machine. The idea was simple, elegant even. If you could model the average consumer, the average investor, the average shock, then you could predict everything: inflation, growth, employment, recession. They called it Dynamic Stochastic General Equilibrium, or DSGE for short. It sounded complex, and that was part of the charm, because complexity, to them, meant credibility. DSGE became the model of choice for central banks around the world, the Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of England. It assumed that people are rational, that markets adjust instantly, that shocks are temporary, and the system always returns to balance. In this world, crises were mathematical anomalies. People didn't panic, governments didn't make irrational moves, and finance behaved. It was a beautiful model, in theory, but there was just one problem. It wasn't built for reality. When the housing market cracked in 2007, DSGE didn't blink, because in its world, housing bubbles weren't possible. Leverage didn't spiral. Banks didn't fall. So while real people were losing homes, jobs, and pensions, the model quietly said, everything is fine. But it didn't stop there. Even after the cracks became earthquakes, central banks kept using the same engine, just tweaking the inputs, hoping for better predictions. It's like using a weather forecast that never predicted rain and blaming the clouds. The problem wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. Because DSGE wasn't designed to describe the real world. It was designed to satisfy a theory, a belief that markets are efficient, humans are rational, and shocks are gentle. And the most dangerous part, that belief still drives decisions today. When a central bank raises rates or prints money, it isn't acting on instinct. It's following outputs. Outputs from a machine that still thinks we live in a balanced, rational world. But the markets know better. That's why reactions feel off, why volatility comes in waves, why predictions miss the mark again and again. The machine is still running, and most people inside the system won't admit it's broken because their careers, reputations, and policies are built on it. But outside that closed loop, there are a few who've started to ask a dangerous question. What if the model isn't just flawed, but fundamentally wrong? To answer that, we have to look at the assumptions, the invisible rules baked into the code, and who they truly serve, because that's where the illusion begins to crack. Every algorithm has a blueprint, and inside DSGE, that blueprint is made of assumptions, elegant shortcuts that turn a chaotic world into something predictable. But predictable for who? Let's start with the core idea. People are rational. It sounds harmless, maybe even flattering. But in practice, it means the model assumes you always make the smartest decision. You never panic. You never overspend. You calculate every choice from saving to investing like a machine. But have you ever met a rational crowd during a financial panic? Markets swing on fear, on herd behavior, on rumors, headlines, and emotion. And yet the algorithm ignores all of that because it can't quantify panic. Then there's perfect information. DSGE assumes everyone has access to the same facts instantly. No secrets, no asymmetries. It's a world where the janitor and the hedge fund manager read the same signals at the same time and react the same way. But real markets thrive on information gaps. Insiders win because others don't know. Delays, deception, and noise aren't bugs in the system. They are the system. And then comes equilibrium. The idea that whatever shock hits the economy, a war, a debt crisis, a collapse, things will eventually return to balance, as if gravity always pulls us back. But what if that's not true? What if shocks build on each other? What if imbalance is the default state, and equilibrium is just the exception we choose to believe? Because here's the truth no one says out loud. These assumptions weren't chosen because they reflect reality. They were chosen because they make the math work. You can't run neat simulations on human chaos. You can't build clean equations on dirty data. So the model simplifies. It trims the mess. And in doing so, it erases the system's most dangerous behaviors. It's like designing an fire alarm that only goes off if the fire starts at room temperature. And yet this is the machine that whispers into the ears of central bankers, that tells them how to act, when to raise rates, when to hold, when to trust. They don't see the full picture, just what the model allows them to see. So when people say the system feels disconnected, when markets behave like they're on another planet, maybe the problem isn't the economy. Maybe it's the lens we're forced to look through. Because if you control the assumptions, you control the outcomes. And someone, somewhere, is very comfortable with those outcomes. But who benefits when the world is modeled wrong? That answer takes us deeper into the relationship between theory and power. Every time the Federal Reserve speaks, the world holds its breath. Markets freeze, reporters listen, and billions move based on a few carefully chosen words. But behind those words, behind the speeches, the press conferences, the projections, there's something far more mechanical. A screen, a forecast, an output. The policymaker reads the numbers. Inflation target, 2%. Growth forecast, moderate. Labor market, tightening. And then comes the most important input of all. What does the model say? Because in the modern central bank, instinct is no longer a strategy. Judgment is dangerous. Deviation is discouraged. Instead, the path is set by simulation. DSGE models, armed with simplified assumptions and historical averages, project how the economy will react to every possible move. Raise rates by 0.25%? Here's what the model expects for inflation, unemployment, GDP. The problem? The model doesn't account for what people actually do. It doesn't see fear in the eyes of small business owners. It doesn't see the tightening credit lines, or the unspoken layoffs, or the psychological weight of economic uncertainty. It sees curves. It sees equilibrium. It sees what it was programmed to see. And because of that, the policies it inspires are often disconnected from reality. A central bank might believe it's cooling inflation gently when in truth it's freezing lending to a halt. Or worse, it might hold rates too low for too long, inflating bubbles it can't detect. All while the model nods quietly in the background saying, "This is optimal." But optimal for who? Because while the model aims for balance, the consequences rarely fall evenly. Asset prices rise, capital concentrates, debt becomes cheaper for those who already own everything. And when things go wrong, as they inevitably do, the same policymakers return to the same machine and ask it for new instructions. It's a loop, a system inside a system, one that looks technocratic on the surface but hides a deeper truth. Policy in this world isn't shaped by people, it's shaped by code. And once you realize that, once you understand how much power has been delegated to the model, you start to see the illusion for what it is. Because when a decision affects millions, but is guided by a simulation built on flawed logic, what you're witnessing isn't policy, it's performance. The next time a central bank acts, look closer. Watch not what they say, but what they assume. Because if the assumptions are wrong, then every decision downstream is too. And the deeper you go into the system, the more you realize those assumptions weren't just careless, they were convenient. But for whom? To find that answer, we need to look at who profits when the model fails, and why they never want it to be fixed. When a model fails, most people lose. The saver sees their money evaporate. The worker watches prices rise faster than wages. The small investor buys in too late and sells at the bottom. But someone always wins. Because for a certain class of insider, the failure isn't a bug. It's the system working exactly as intended. Take the assumption that markets are efficient, that prices reflect all available information. If that were true, there'd be no room for edge, no arbitrage, no timing, no advantage. But in reality, the ones closest to the data, the policy, and the model itself always act before the rest. They don't just watch the model, they game it. When central banks telegraph decisions based on forecasts, hedge funds and institutions align their trades not with reality, but with expected policy reactions. They ride the lag, exploit the blind spots, and profit from the very system that claims to be neutral. And while the public debates whether inflation is transitory, these players are already 5 moves ahead, rebalancing portfolios before most even understand the headline. Then there are the asset managers. For them, low interest rates aren't a mystery, they're a gift. Because when rates are low, money chases yield. And that means stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity. Every distortion created by the model becomes an opportunity. as long as you're on the right side of it. But it goes deeper. Think tanks, academic economists, and policy advisors, many of them have built their careers defending the model. They publish papers, get invited to central bank roundtables, influence legislation, and most importantly, they reinforce the illusion of control. Because once you admit the model is broken, you lose the map. And for those in power, that's unthinkable. So instead of fixing the model, they tweak it, add a variable, adjust a coefficient, move the goalposts. And all the while, inequality grows, volatility spreads, and confidence in the system erodes, not because people are irrational, but because they feel something the model refuses to see. The game is tilted, not by conspiracy, not by design, but by inertia, a refusal to challenge the framework that keeps the machine running and the money flowing in the same direction. Because when the same few always win, and the same many always lose, and no one changes the rules, it's not an accident. It's tradition. But even traditions have limits. Because what happens when the illusion becomes too obvious to ignore? For decades, the model held. Not because it worked, but because enough people believed it might. But belief has a breaking point, and lately, the cracks are no longer subtle. Inflation moves in ways the model can't explain. Markets rise on bad news and crash on good. Growth stalls even when every forecast said it shouldn't. And slowly, almost reluctantly, the doubt is seeping in. Inside central banks, a quiet debate has begun, not on TV, not in press releases, but in internal memos, backroom meetings, and side conversations between people who've run the simulations and don't like what they see. They whisper about nonlinear shocks, about behavioral feedback loops, about the reality that real people don't act like the model says they do. But here's the dilemma. Once you admit the model is wrong, what replaces it? Because to abandon it means to abandon control, to admit that the economy is more like a living organism than a machine, that it can't be steered with precision, only influenced with care. And that kind of humility, it's rare in rooms built on certainty. So the model stays, broken, elegant, powerful. Still driving decisions, still shaping outcomes, still whispering its predictions into the ears of those who set the rules. But outside those rooms, something else is shifting. People have started to sense the disconnect, not in theory, in experience. When their rent doubles but inflation is under control. When their job disappears but growth is on track. When the rules say stability, but their lives say chaos. It's not that the public has read the model, it's that they've stopped believing its results. And once belief fades, control follows. The machine hasn't stopped, but the signal is flickering. And for the first time in decades, there's a question hanging in the air, one no algorithm can answer. What happens when the model no longer moves the market? Because no one listens anymore. It was never just about numbers. It was about trust, in models, in institutions, in the idea that someone, somewhere, had it under control. But control, it turns out, was a performance, a carefully rehearsed act, powered by a machine no one dared to challenge, because challenging it meant admitting we don't fully understand the system we built. Now that illusion is wearing thin, not because of any single crisis, but because of the quiet accumulation of dissonance, the growing gap between what the model says and what people feel. In the end, the most powerful algorithm in finance isn't one that trades in milliseconds. It's the one that shapes belief, and belief is shifting. What comes next won't be written in equations. It will be shaped by questions we've avoided for too long. What kind of economy do we actually want? Who should the system serve? And what happens when we stop pretending it's all just math? The model will still whisper, but now more people are listening with suspicion. And maybe, just maybe, that's how real change begins. If this opened your eyes to a side of the system most never get to see, like the video, share it, and subscribe. There's a lot more they haven't told you, and we're just getting started.